Yeah, hi everyone. This presentation will focus on an assessment of how COVID-19's impacted the progress on SDGs, how it impacts democracy and human rights, as well as civic space in Asia, and how all of that together poses a challenge for international engagement and advocacy by CSOs. This presentation, the information is compiled by the inputs of 4 sub-regional researchers, as well as interviews and consulting a multiple number of international indexes on these issues. In terms of COVID-19, I think the key thing we want to note for Asia is that it's quite severe compared to other regions because we have something like 77 million people who have been infected. And in terms of the 6 regions of the world, Asia stands at number 3 with more than 1.1 million deaths and increasing. In terms of vaccination rate, it's still fairly low with only 39% of the population fully vaccinated. And if you look at the numbers of infections and deaths, you will see that is in proportion with the low number of the population being vaccinated. So what does that really mean? It means that because of COVID-19 and the severe impact in the region, government's attention have been taken away from the SDGs. That's one. And 2, the rules to contain the spread of infections have also disproportionately affected civic space and, at the end, regressed democracy. So in terms of SDGs, what we note is, in terms of implementation, SDGs, most countries have tried to, integrate it into their national development plan. And often it's put under a ministry or a council, and it's these agencies that are responsible for the implementation. But as I said earlier, the implementation is affected because of, attention being diverted away to deal with COVID-19. So the short answer based on the, sub-regional researchers and, a review of other indexes and as well as interviews shows that Asia is unlikely to achieve the SDG goals in 2030 because of the major setback of COVID-19 pandemic. The most progressed SDGs in the region is the quality of education, clean water and sanitation, and infrastructure, especially internet infrastructure. But in terms of quality of education, we can see being online also had some effect. There are some moderately increasing SDGs, such as in terms of hunger, good health, well-being, and also affordable and clean energy. However, there has been, a decrease in SDG 15, life on land. Again, citing major challenges associated with COVID-19. There are also, because of COVID-19, other challenges that have come in because of, the ability not to reduce inequalities, and as well as other elements such as, life below water. In terms of SDG 16, which relates to, democracy, human rights, and civic space, very few countries are on track. And in fact, in terms of, CSO involvement in the pushing of the progress of SDGs, there's hardly any information for us to make any conclusive remark. So what can we say about SDGs? I think we can have more information if we look at their submission to the SDG process, which is the voluntary national review. The SDGs began in 2015, and several countries began to submit their reports starting already on 2016, and it's been picking up year by year. But by 2021, every country in Asia has submitted at least one VNR, to the high-level, political forum, except for Myanmar. And it was supposed to do so this year, but it got sidetracked with the coup. One other observation we can make is, authoritarian regimes in the region tend to adopt SDGs later and also submit their BNR reports later compared to democracies. And South and Southeast Asia are two sub-regions where at least 5 countries have submitted their second BNR, so in which that's a good thing. In terms of some key SDGs that the project focused on, we can say that gender equality received the most number of recommendations in almost every sub-region, and made up for 10 or 20% of all recommendations. So that's a good sign. In terms of SDG, 10 related to reduce inequality, it has been in the top 5 recommendations. But of course, we are unable to track, as I mentioned earlier, the info because it's simply not available, and challenges remain in this area. In terms of peace, justice, and strong institutions, only 2 countries are on track: Maldives and Timor. These are very small countries, and only Japan is listed as the country that has achieved SDG 16. All countries face major challenges, and this is something of a concern when we talk about, democracy and civic space. So if we look at other indicators that will give us a sense of where the SDGs are and what are their priorities, again, SDG 16 is something up there. It's one of the top 5 UPR recommendations, and that simply says that it is an issue of concern, and therefore there have been more, member state recommendations to each other on, trying to move forward on SDG 16. Similarly, on gender equality, decent work, reduced inequalities, and quality education also are top areas of recommendations. If we look at the other elements of the human rights mechanism, let's say the special procedures and mandate holders, only 9 out of 29 Asian countries in this project have standing invitations to special procedures. Most visits from special rapporteur, apart from the country-specific mandate like North Korea, Myanmar, and Cambodia, it's on issues related to food, poverty, freedom of religion, disappearances, and water sanitation. In terms of human rights, National Human Rights Mechanism, 19 out of 29 countries have established NHRI, and out of which 10 have been given the A status and 9 have been given B status. 10 countries have not established NHRI, so still quite a long way to go. In terms of treaty bodies, something that we know well, CEDAW, CRC, and CRPD, the one for disabilities, are widely subscribed. The first CEDAW and CRC are accepted by 29 countries, or all Asian countries. The Convention of the Elimination of Racial Discrimination is also quite high. It's been accepted by 26 countries. And economic and cultural rights, 25 countries, and disability, 25 countries. The least expected is a Convention of Enforced Disappearances and a Convention of Protection of Migrant Workers and Members of the Family. Only 7 have signed in Asia, and often they tend to be descending countries. One thing that we note that most countries have completed 3 cycles of the UPR, but compared to the progress we've seen in the number of recommendations accepted from cycle 1 to cycle 2, moving to cycle 3, there's been an overall drop. In terms of civic space and democracy, we see in the context of COVID-19, authoritarian regimes continue to close civic space. They have introduced even tighter control. Flawed democracies and hybrid regimes are placing more obstacles and also beginning to close their spaces. As a result, you will see in flawed democracies and hybrid regimes, there's a higher incidence of harassment and legal persecution of journalists and civil society activists aside. And in authoritarian countries, there's a move to take total control of the media through censorship, persecution of critics, and closure of media outlets. Specifically, they have paid special attention on trying to control content over social media through the use of fake news laws and gateway laws. As such, the evidence is pointing out that COVID-19 has either caused a stagnation or regression in democratic progress in the region. In spite of all this, developments, where are civil society groups in Asia in the general international landscape? They continue to have challenges. While they do get an opportunity to engage, either at the UN level or in the region at the AADF and other international networks convened by INGOs, etc. You find that this is the nature of the engagement. First, CSOs definitely get invited to these activities. These forums may offer training, information, sometimes also opportunities to amplify themselves, which they are not able to do at the national level, at regional and international forum. But broadly, that amplification is an echo chamber, and just stays within that forum and network. It doesn't sort of spill over and go back to the national level and amplify in the ground where it's needed most. Other challenges include access to resources, as well as capacity to participate in these meetings. So this is something that we see, in the reports related to, international engagement, and also came out very strongly through the interviews of CSO personnel that we undertook during this project. As a result, we have the following recommendations. For the SDGs, we recommend that governments, take a more focused approach by establishing national mechanism, mainstreaming CSOs, including their inputs and data in the VNR process, and also set clear indicators so we can track the achievement of these SDG goals, and with support to see local CSOs with good resources. We urge CSOs to continue their good work and continue to keep the spotlight to provide alternative perspective to the PNRs, continue their checks and balances on governments, forge partnerships, share resources, provide a concrete recommendation to the SDG process, and more importantly, secure resources to do their good work. For COVID-19, the overall issue is ready to, increase the vaccination rate, so people are more resistant to the challenges of the virus. And if there are health protocols or restrictions, that these respect international human rights law and standards, and in doing so, pay particular attention to vulnerable communities. CSOs, once again, to play the watchdog function, to monitor the government, engage them, partner with other sectors to ensure that, the implementations of COVID-19 protocols do not infringe rights, and to collect evidence-based research to support the arguments, and once again, also to ensure they have resources to take up this work. In terms of democracy and civic space, we once again urge governments, especially during this period, not to implement harsh laws and to ensure that they do not, infringe on international human rights. And in rolling out these laws, they should not be used for political purposes and to persecute and restrict civil society. And any laws that are, placed to deal with the COVID-19 situation should be immediately removed when they are no longer needed. And the government should also support and ensure, there are independent oversight mechanisms, and also to support civil society in, doing its work. CSOs, we urge them to continue to work alongside governments and multilateral platforms to generate dialogue, to ensure greater accountability, build cross-border alliances, increase their presence, especially in the digital space, and to ensure there's alternative information to government narratives around these issues. And finally, in terms of CSO engagement, we ask, UN and other international organizations to provide, CSOs the opportunity to engage at the forums, to ensure that the barriers for participations are lowered, to widen the range of, issue-based CSOs in discussions, and also to include their data when formulating information related to democracy and human rights. And their participation should also be, known publicly. CSOs, to engage in these forums, to undertake evidence-based research, be active, prepare in advance for these activities, engage in partnerships so that they have control over decision-making and implementation, and to work and build alliances to strengthen their position, and to persevere in spite of challenges and lack of resources. So with that, I thank you very much. This is the presentation, the Asia overview, and thanks all once again to all the sub-regional researchers, and we benefited tremendously from the interviews and the reports of the various international organizations. Thank you very much.